To order. Welcome to meeting number 9 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on International Trade. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 24th. Please note that the first hour will be public and the second hour will be in camera. As a reminder for us all to remain healthy and safe, please note that masks must be worn in committee rooms except when members are at their place during parliamentary proceeding. All those inside the committee room should follow best practices of maintaining a proper hand hygiene by using the hand sanitizer provided. As the chair, I will enforce these measures and thank you for your cooperation. To ensure an orderly meeting, please note you may speak in the official language of your choice. At the bottom of your screen, you have the choice of either floor, English, or French. If interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately and we will ensure interpretation is properly restored. The raise hand feature is on the main toolbar should you wish to speak. And when speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you're not speaking, your microphone should be on mute. And finally, a reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. You think that we could start to dispense of those opening comments, but anyway. Welcome to the committee. Glad to see so many of us actually sitting at the table. It does feel a little bit like life is getting back to normal. As we go forward. So pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, January 31st, 2022, the committee is proceeding with the study of Canada's exports of environmental and clean technology goods and services. This is a study that the committee is resuming from the second session of the 43rd Parliament. So with us today by video conference from the Department of Natural Resources, we have Daniel Dufour, Director General Innovation Branch, Amanda Wilson, Director General Office of Energy Research and Development, Alison Christie, Director Clean Growth Hub, and Anna Vanderkamp, Director. Welcome to you all. We will start with 5 minutes of opening remarks. Mr. Dufour, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a great pleasure for my colleagues and myself to be here today to talk about the clean tech sector in Canada. And some of us have had the pleasure of joining the previous committee session, so it's great to be back. So again, my name is Daniel Dufour, and I'm the Director General for Innovation at Natural Resources Canada. If you allow me, I'll start with an overview of the clean tech sector in Canada. So clean tech, broadly speaking, is an important sector in its own right, but furthermore, contributes to all economic sectors, so improving both environmental performance and competitiveness. So clean tech provides sustainable solutions, notably in reducing emissions and waste and water use, in developing advanced materials and bioproducts, and in extracting, transforming, or producing natural resources goods more efficiently. And that could be in energy, mining, and forest products. Strong clean tech sector will be critical for Canada and the world to achieve net zero goals, as we know. And reaching these goals by 2050 will require widespread use of technologies. And based on the International Energy Agency, 50% of said technologies are not yet available. So the potential is huge, with the global market for low carbon solution expected to grow to over 34 trillion through 2030. And in order to better understand of the clean tech sector, the opportunities, NRCan and ICIIT, Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, in partnership with Statistic Canada, launched the Clean Tech Data Strategy back in 2017. And as a result of this work, we now have some data on clean tech contributions to Canada's economy and export that I'll go over rapidly. Clean tech sector contribution to GDP was 26.8 billion in 2020, and it grew faster than the overall economy between 2012 to 2020. As you know, the sector is comprised mostly of SMEs with 80%. And in terms of employment, it increased by more than 25% over the 2012-2020 period, which is 7 times faster than the rest of the economy. And it employed over 200,000 Canadians in 2020. Also in 2022, Canada ranked second in the world after the US in the Global Tech Top 100 list, with 13 Canadian firms being nominated or being successful on that list, all of which receive federal funding, including 8 of these companies who receive actually funding specifically from Natural Resources Canada. And Canadian clean tech companies are also important creators and holders of intellectual property, with over 65% of clean tech firms holding IP versus roughly 27% for all SMEs. A large portion of Canadian clean tech products and services are exported, primarily to the US. So clean tech export reached $5.9 billion in 2020, and exports grew 23% since 2012, outpacing overall exports, which grew 23%. In 2019, 73% of these exports went to the US, followed by Europe with 14%. And the top clean tech products and services that are exported by Canada are complex manufactured goods, they're scientific and R&D services and support services. With respect to the NRCan and other federal departments' support, they're offering a suite of programs that support clean tech firms from R&D to demonstration to deployment. And in addition, support is offered for trade and investment promotion to Global Affairs Canada Trade Commissioner Service, also EDC and Invest in Canada. We also have the Clean Growth Hub, which is co-led by NRCan and CIIT, which really supports innovators and adopters navigate the federal system, for funding and services. It also enhances federal clean tech program coordination, and it also aims to strengthen the federal capacity to track and report on clean tech outcomes. Let me close with a snapshot of key innovators active across Canada. Just to name a few, in BC, we have Econa, who produce clean hydrogen. In Alberta, we have Recover, who makes valuable products from oil, drilling waste. We have a Saskatchewan-based Papa Bravo Innovations, who develop electric vehicles for underground mining. We have in Ontario, Polar Sapphire, who provides cleaner alumina for batteries. In Quebec, we have Elcam Metal, who replace coal with biocarbon briquettes made from forest residues. We also have the Quebec-based GHG-SAT, who develops remote sensing to detect GHG emissions from industrial facilities. And lastly, we have in Nova Scotia, Carbon Cure, who is implementing carbon capture solutions by storing carbon dioxide and recycling waste from concrete products. So these are, few of the clean tech innovators we have in Canada that are really a source of pride and confidence in our future. And I want to thank you, Madam Chair, for your good attention. And my colleagues and I are available to answer questions that the committee members may have. Thank you.
Very much, Mr. Dufar. And we will now open it up to our committee members. Mr. Lewis for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Dufar, for your intervention and all the information. Very important conversation, of course, and ironically, I came from the sewer industry, and in the sewer industry, we invented technology that we shipped across North America and the world that instead of digging up the street and ripping up the pavement and cutting up the curbs and cutting down the streets, we went in with robots and materials and resins, and we did it all in a day instead of over the course of some 6 months, as an example. So when you spoke to this technology, of course, I listened with a very keen ear. So I guess my first line of questioning would be, and you did, I believe I heard you right when you said that the biggest importer of Canadian clean technology is the United States. Did I hear you right, sir?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And then who does Canada import the most from? Is that equally the United States?
Anna? Excuse me. I'll ask my colleague Anna Vinderkamp if she can answer that question.
Yes, absolutely, from the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And then so very earlier on, you had mentioned about clean water. So I'm going to talk specifically to our region. So my region is Essex, down by Windsor, and of course I'm quite sure that my honourable colleague, Mr. Massey, will also be talking about electric vehicles and the battery plants potentially coming down to that area. But I want to really talk specifically to the clean water side right now. Because Essex County, Windsor, we're basically surrounded by water on 3/4 of us, so we're almost an island in and of ourselves. So my question is, this technology then, if we are the biggest importers of American clean technology, and America is the largest importer of our clean technologies, do the countries work united to make sure that we're working on the same fronts? Meaning that we've only got one set of water, of course. So do we work united, or are we using two different types of technologies?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for this question. So this touch to a certain extent, certainly on partnership that we have with our American colleagues, so with the United States. And I think the government to government has a variety of partnerships, but it's more a partnership in terms of the technologies per se, and to what extent the industry is actually joining forces on some of these developments. I wonder, Amanda, might there be examples you'd like to list in terms of collaboration we have with the United States?
Sure. Thanks, Dan, and hello, committee members. I'm the Director General of the Office of Energy Research and Development. Maybe I could just say that, as Dan said, it really does depend on the types of technologies that you're talking about. Obviously, with some types of technologies, it's more important to have consistent standards and regulatory measures that span borders than others. So one would be EV charging, for example. That's obviously an area where there is a benefit to have common standards, across North America. In other areas, we do work closely in partnership with relevant American colleagues. Now, there are obviously a number of industry partnerships that happen at the sort of company or industry association level, but we also engage in collaborations with our partners and other governments around the world. So a good example would be the Department of Energy, for example, and NRCan has had ongoing relationships with the Department of Energy and MOUs in that space in a number of areas over the past number of years.
Thank you very much for those questions. Also, earlier on in the intervention there, or in the speech, I should say, there was talks about parks. And again, ironically, one of the members on this committee brought up this morning in the House of Commons about a national park potentially that will happen across both his riding and my riding. And so I'm wondering, can you speak to the clean technology with the parks that's currently being used in Canada, or what's on the table going forward on that front?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry to my colleague. This would be a question best addressed by my colleagues from Parks Canada. So I'm not in a position to answer this one.
Okay, but we don't have Parks Canada on this. Okay, very well. That's good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Sheehan, please.
Well, thank you very much for the to the presenters as well, and for undertaking this important study. And when I first started thinking about this back in 2019 and introducing this to the committee, it just seems we've come a long way, and particularly shortly, even from 2021 till now, especially with some of the investments that have been made down in Southern Ontario in the auto sector, across Canada, even in my riding of Algoma Steel, where you're seeing investments into green, clean technologies. In the case of Algoma Steel, they're going from a coal-based operation to an electric arc. And so that, of course, affects the supply chain, the downstream and the upstream, because, even the market onto itself is demanding more clean, green products. And so perhaps maybe you could make a comment on some of the investments that have been made, and in particular, since we're dealing with natural resources, and I'm thinking of PDAC, the Prospector Development Association of Canada, whose conference is coming up shortly. It's going to be sort of a hybrid. There's going to be a Zoom portion to it. There's also going to be a in-person in June. And I remember the last one that we were assembled in person in 2020, there was the announcement of the various tax measures that were there for companies that employ in the mining sector, clean technologies. So perhaps maybe you could make some of those comments of what we have seen recently over the last little while that's available for Canadian companies to invest into themselves, into the clean, green technologies, the various funds and activities.
Thank you for the question. I'll look at it two ways. So you mentioned the investment in Algoma, so happy to touch on that. And then specifically you ask questions around the tax incentives we may have in terms of clean tech adoption and clean tech development. So I'll take the first question and ask my colleague Anna of Enerchem to talk about taxation more specifically. So in terms of investment around Algoma, I think They're one of the tools that's been used quite extensively of late in terms of really helping industry, including automotive, really decarbonize and really adopt cleaner technologies has been CIIT, the Strategic Innovation Fund that you may be familiar with, under which there was the Net Zero Accelerator that was launched. And this is really an $8 billion program, with our colleagues at CIIT, but NRCan has been working hand in hand with CIIT really around the governance in terms of going through selection of what are the projects that will help really decarbonize, really achieve most impact in terms of GHG reduction, and also enabling that transformation of the industry towards cleaner technologies and building a solid environmental ecosystem. And I'll now turn it to Anna Vanderkamp maybe to tell us a bit about taxation, if that's possible. Thank you.
Hi, well, I think maybe I could thank you for the question. I'll just speak quickly to some of the various tax measures that we have in the federal government, which has been developing, as you say, very quickly. So of course, we have an accelerated capital cost allowance for clean energy and energy efficient equipment, which allows with it a Canadian renewable and conservation expense. And we also have a new ITC investment tax credit for CCUS, as Amanda Wilson can speak to, I'm sure, better than me. But in addition to that, we have recently, of course, the mention of the manufacturer's tax credit. So that's a 50% general corporate and small business income tax credit. Those would go into effect January 1st, 2022. And there's other additional investment tax credits for renewables and potentially for hydrogen and clean tech that have also been announced and are being worked on now. Plus, of course, the mineral exploration tax credit is maybe the one that you were referring to, where we have a doubling of that for critical minerals.
And while we're sticking on mining, I have to be a good Northern Ontarian and ask about the Ring of Fire. We have a provincial election coming up, and I've seen the Premier's made some comments about it recently. We know we need a road to get to the minerals. The minerals represent billions and billions of potential dollars, in particular for EV and clean tech. Could you just basically, give us sort of a summary of discussions that you might be having with the province and other stakeholders at this particular time?
Sorry, I'll turn to my colleague. This one we're not in a position to answer, sorry. Mr. Chair. Madam Chair.
Couldn't hear.
It's a provincial jurisdiction, I believe.
To be able to answer that question. That's most unfortunate. It's been interesting to get an answer.
Yep.
To where that's going.
If any comment other than with the road, I recognize that the road is a provincial jurisdiction, but if there's any ongoing discussions or anything that you wish to enlighten us around the Ring of Fire, or
we'll be happy to come back with written comments on the Ring of Fire.
Okay, we'll wait for the written comments then. Well, thank you very much. How much more time do I have? About 3 seconds. Yeah. Ring of Fire.
Okay, Mr. Savard Tremblay for 6 minutes, please.
Bonjour, merci Madame la Présidente. Salutations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here, and good afternoon to my committee colleagues. Now, we've got some carbon capture and storage capabilities, but despite that, there are a number of discussions underway. There's some potential, there's some problems, but when it comes to assistance for transition, for example, in Alberta, it's something that exists, but in the middle and to long term, it's not something that's going to take place. Do you think that it's justified to focus on development and export of that technology at this point in time?
Would you like me to take that? Thank you for the question. So I think, as we look toward the energy transition, as you highlighted, and we look toward the government's commitments around net zero emissions by 2050, the government has been fairly clear that we need to look at all of the tools in the toolbox. We need to deploy existing technologies to help reduce emissions to the extent possible. So things like, solar and wind and other clean technologies like we are talking about here today. We need to help, we need to continue to develop emerging technologies and clean technologies so that they will be ready at a lower price point and at an increased rate of performance when we need them down the road. And we need to make sure that we can help reduce emissions through things like carbon capture, utilization, and storage, as you mentioned. And this includes technologies that can reduce emissions at point source, or where they are created at various industrial settings, whether that's in the oil and gas industry or other heavy industries. And then that also includes other what we call carbon dioxide removal technologies. So these are earlier stage but increasingly proven technologies such as direct air capture, which can remove not just current emissions from the air, but have the potential to reduce historic emissions or even get into negative emissions when you look at technologies like bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. So I think the approach that has been taken is to, make sure that we are not to ensure that we are using all of the tools in the toolbox, essentially, and so that we are not leaving behind technologies that could provide significant emissions reductions now and into the future. The government, as Anna mentioned earlier, has committed to introducing an investment tax credit for carbon capture, use, and storage that was committed to in the last budget, and that is currently in the process of development. And the government in the last federal budget did commit $319 million to the research, the development, and demonstration of a full range of carbon capture, use, and storage technologies. And my office at NRCan is currently working to help provide the funding to develop these technologies, both in our federal lab network, but also with some of the very, very ingenious clean tech innovators that Dan mentioned earlier. So these would be organizations like Carbon Cure or Carbon Engineering, Fonte, just to name a few. Canada really does punch above its weight in the carbon capture, use, and storage space. We were one of the global sort of early adopters of the technology. We are world leaders in the technology, and we believe that that Canada really does hold a lot of potential to develop the technologies for our own needs, but then to, from an export perspective, help to export these key technologies around the world. Thank you.
Cependant,
Well, there's been criticism of how productive it is, and we've seen that it was last November by Radio-Canada. There's also Polytechnique in Montreal that has said this is technology that should be reserved to certain sectors, like agriculture, for example, because these are sectors that have more trouble reducing their emissions. With respect to net zero goals, generally speaking, governments should focus on other solutions. I'd like to hear your impressions on those remarks that were made.
Thank you very much. So we are certainly, we listen very carefully to all comments and all submissions that are made with respect to carbon capture, use, and storage, or CCUS. We're currently in the process of developing a CCUS strategy for Canada for release, I think, later this year. And as part of that, we have done a broad-based engagement with a range of stakeholders across the country, from all sectors of society and all industries. So we are certainly aware of those views, saying that carbon capture should be limited to certain industries or certain segments of the industrial sector. But I think at the end of the day, we have to listen and consider these things carefully, but we also have to listen and consider to groups such as the International Energy Agency and the IPCC, which are saying increasingly that if the world holds any hope of hitting net zero emissions targets, carbon capture, use, and storage is going to absolutely have to play a significant role.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wilson.
In that.
Sorry to interrupt, but just there's
Go
only
ahead.
so much time and so many
Of course.
questions. Mr. Massey for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for our witnesses. I came in a little late, so I didn't hear all your testimony. I'll listen to it later. A couple of things I do want to hit on is to find out, following up on one of our studies we're working on is with regards to electric vehicles and standards in the United States. What is your role in, like we follow right now, CAFE standards as well as others with regards to exportation of vehicles and emissions with the United States. What's your role on that, and how well is Canada positioned there? We've seen one announcement, some potential future ones, but we also have an aging auto manufacturing base of other engines. What's being done to, I guess, bridge the improvements at those, or is there anything from your department?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. I mean, there's definitely collaboration on a variety of levels, but I don't think the one around electric vehicle standards is the area of NRCan. I think this one would be with our colleagues from Environment and Climate Change Canada in terms of these negotiations on standards.
Is there anything then with NRCan that's dealing with the auto industry, though, to close the gap of some of the combustible engines that we have, and then the upcoming CAFE changes in U.S.? Is there any work being done with the auto companies to actually improve those engines? NRCan in the past has been involved in some investments. Is there anything being done for that? Because we have several other plants that have aging combustible engines, and some could meet some of the new standards coming in place, some of them may not. So I'm just wondering if there's any projects in that capacity.
So I'm aware of collaboration, again, on emission standards, but I wouldn't be able to say the level of collaboration on codes and standard for ZEV components. And again, that would be a question for my colleagues at ECCC.
Okay. All right. And to follow up with regards to some of the, I mean, we're meeting some clean tech growth going into the United States and other places. What is being done about Canada has quite a reputation of sending plastics and other contaminants overseas. What has been done with regards to that? Is there anything in ingenuity to change that? That's one of the things that, first of all, questionable to do. Second of all, are we increasing the environmental imprint of that as we continue to ship that garbage and other waste outside of our country?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. I do have to say that, again, on the plastic, this would be a file which is with our colleagues at Environment and Climate Change Canada. I know there is a plastic innovation fund that has been announced, so that would probably be an area of interest to look into in terms of getting response to that question.
That's fine, but wouldn't it make some sense, though, I guess, for NRCan and others to get involved in terms of some of our exports that are actually contaminants, involved in actually cleaning them up if we are going to continue to have them as export markets? I mean, it just seems to me it's one-sided, and why wouldn't we be using some of our strength in that component if we're going to continue to export? I mean, we might make some minimum standards in the world. Some of it we actually is quite shameful. The Philippines is a good example of that. I'm just a little bit surprised that there isn't some type of joint cooperation going on to actually improve if we are going to continue to be a nation of exporting contaminants to do so.
There is certainly a dialogue and some collaboration between NRCan and our colleagues at TCCC on the plastic file and some of the issues that you have raised. But again, the lead is really with them around bioplastics and exportation. So again, some level of collaboration, absolutely. But I'm not privy to a lot of the discussion or some of the decision that may be going forward around the plastic files in particular.
Okay, fair enough, and I appreciate that. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to add in that our colleagues in the Canadian Forestry Service do have, through some of their programming, they've been working on various bio-based or forestry-based bioplastics, which, doesn't go to your point of, cleaning up contaminants from plastics, but does speak to substitutions for them.
Yeah, no,
and I can close just on circularity. The circular economy is certainly a file that, again, is under the lead of ECCC that is looking into these very issues, and we're certainly working with ECCC on that file. So I think that would likely be an area that would be relevant in terms of circular economy and what's being done by the government on that file in particular.
Thanks. That's very much appreciated. That's kind of what I'm looking at, is seeing whether there's collaboration going on that end of it. I mean, we got some good research on the other end of what we're doing on the that side, but. Just lastly, with regards to this current trade agreements that we have, has there been any assessments with regards to the new environmental chapters that we have? I mean, it's pretty early still for some of those. This is some of the first time we've actually had environmental and labor standards. When you think of USMCA or CUMSA, whatever you want to call it, or the new NAFTA, it is still relatively new. But has there been any, work done to evaluate the changes that have taken place, because those are actually in our trade agreements, different than many other ones that we've done in the past. So just looking to see if there's been any response to that initiative.
A very brief response, if possible.
Sorry, not in a position to insert this one, which would be with global affairs. Sorry to say. I do want to come back rapidly just to correct one thing in terms of the collaboration on ZEV. I do want to say that ECCC works on a mission, but NRCan works on codes and standards for ZEV components and infrastructure. So there is collaboration with US on that in particular. Sorry.
Mr. Baldinelli for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here this afternoon and for their presentation. When I was going through the report, and I noticed it mentions the U.S. was our primary export partner for environmental and clean technology, about 73.2% of the value of our Canadian exports. And you indicated the highest value in 2019 was $2 billion, and that was in clean electricity. As someone from Niagara, which is home to the Sir Adam Beck facilities and 2,200 megawatts of hydroelectric power, that's great to see. But the one thing that just caught my eye was the notion, and I'm looking for the kind of the definition that the government uses for clean electricity. Now, I mean, we're talking about a North American integrated grid. So is it nuclear? Is it hydro? Is it natural gas? I mean, how does the department distinguish what's clean electricity?
I will turn to my colleague, Anna Vanderkam, to answer this one. Anna, please.
Yeah, my understanding is that clean electricity is a non-emitting renewable, a non-emitting source, so renewables and or nuclear.
Well, I mean, you're talking about a province that is 60% nuclear. I mean, and so I think that's an interesting fact and thing that we're not going to get away from. I mean, in fact, we're looking at investments in SMR technologies. Earlier, one of the officials had indicated a need to assist emerging technologies, and that whole move towards the potential for SMRs, and our move towards getting towards net zero. So does the government see the potential and the benefit of SMRs moving forward?
Can I turn to you, Amanda?
Sure. I will give a brief answer, and then we can, of course, follow up with our colleagues as needed. But as you would know, NRCan released an SMR roadmap, I want to say a couple of years ago, but I might be a little bit off on that. And we have been working, across the department and with colleagues inside of government and out to advance the technologies. I know that our colleagues at CIIT have funded an SMR related project, and I know that my colleagues in the Nuclear Energy Division continue to work on that, and we'd be happy to provide an update.
Thank you. I'm just going to further on go about that whole notion of assisting emerging technologies. There was an exciting opportunity in the renewable sector in 2001 in Niagara, again within my own riding. There was a partnership between Walker Industries, Comcor Environmental, and Enbridge. It was a $42 million project which captures methane from landfill waste. They said it had the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 48,000 tons and actually, heat up to 8,750 homes. And in fact, what they're doing is they're working with local industries. I know, I believe this project is working with the local General Motors facility and factory there on cogeneration facilities. And they've built some generators there to use for additional power transmission to save costs from its hydro facilities. So I'm wondering, is that something that you're looking at as well, that whole notion of renewables from waste? Excuse me.
Sure. Do you want me to take that, Dan?
Please.
Sure. So, we look at a broad range of technologies, which includes obviously energy from waste and other sources. I'm not familiar with the project that you're speaking of specifically, but I can tell you that we have funded a number of projects that have related to energy from waste. And I would say that is a technology that has been talked about for some time and is still in development. You also mentioned methane. And as you know, the government has been working in the methane space for some time and has made some significant commitments there.
Thank you. And Madam Chair?
34 seconds.
No, I'll cede my time.
Okay, thank you. All right, on to Mr. Raya for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On a related question, European Union has declared nuclear and natural gas as green and sustainable. What is your thought? What is Canada's position on this?
Mendo, could you take that? Sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, I keep getting mixed up with my double mute. Sorry about that. I don't know that Canada has put labels per se on natural gas and nuclear, I think was the other one that you said. I think we look more specifically toward energy intensity, understanding that it will be important to find the right mix of energy sources and technologies as we move ahead to net zero. In terms of natural gas in particular, as I'm sure you are aware, there is a lot of interest right now about the potential for combining natural gas with carbon capture, use and storage in order to produce very low carbon intensity hydrogen.
Okay. Coming to the evolution of the electric vehicles and the batteries that are required, obviously we are home to a lot of critical minerals. China has taken a lead in the manufacturing of batteries. Not only the batteries, processing of the minerals and other chemicals required for the manufacturing of batteries. Some parts of Europe have also stepped forward. United States has been seeing implementation of 7 or 8 multi-billion-dollar plans for the manufacturing of batteries. Couple of years back, I think almost 1.5, 2 years back, there was a meeting of battery manufacturers, mining, battery technologies, electric vehicle manufacturers, to find how do we develop the Canadian companies in this field. But that meeting happened in the US Department of Commerce. But when I look at Natural Resources Canada website, I do see the listing of 31 critical minerals, but nowhere have found what is our strategy. What is our strategy to fast track development of everything from mines to mineral processing to technologies to the manufacturing of batteries? While you can say that, what part of it is with ISED, I understand that. But don't we think that we need a sort of probably a Team Canada approach at the top level, where the federal government, various departments join hands with the provincial governments, with the industries, bodies to develop and actually implement. And even before going there, I'm sure you should be working in coordination with other arms of the federal government. Is there any plan that is available for us to look into that shows what is the path we are going to take to develop mines? You know, the approval of mines take 5 to 7 years. So is there any plan there we can see what is the path forward? What is the strategy? How is it being implemented? Who are the players implementing it? Anything available to us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question. Since at least 2019, there's been a whole lot of engagement, so a lot of research has been undertaking, a lot of stakeholder engagement to really inform actions being taken through what is referred to as the Federal Battery Initiative. So it's not a document per se, it's more of the governmental approach in terms of positioning Canada on the battery files and figuring out what are the opportunities and what are the gaps. And there has been a whole lot of that engagement, and also produce a report that was called From Mines to Mobility, Seizing Opportunities for Canada and the Global Battery Value Chain. So a lot of work has been done. And to date, significant amount of work has been really undertaken by the federal family on various aspects of the Federal Battery Initiative to say that there are federal departments, multiple federal departments engaged in this, but NRCan would be one of them. I said Global Affairs, Invest in Canada. We've looked at really expanding the Mines to Mobility initiative. Strong focus has been really on attracting anchor investment to build a domestic battery ecosystem linked to the automotive sectors, but there has also been work done by NRCan with other entities like Sustainable Development Technology Canada, the Bank of Development Canada, to look at innovation for stationary battery applications. And there has been initiatives in that space like the Charging the Future Impact Challenge. And also, if you look at the ministerial mandate letter of late, you will see that there are several priorities being identified around the vision of developing a sustainable battery innovation and industrial ecosystem in Canada. So it's looking at the full spectrum from minerals, to the manufacturing.
Thank you very much.
And there are
Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Dufour. On to Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 2.5 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you. In the last budget, the last federal budget in 2021, last spring, it stated that the government wanted to launch a consultation process on carbon, and that was in the weeks to come. And so it appears to resemble something that was adopted in March in 2021, a mechanism for carbon, a tariff to establish a rate for it at the border. Now, if the countries in question aren't ambitious enough when it comes to climate change, then will the consultations promised that were supposed to take place last summer actually took place?
Amanda, are you in a position to respond to this one?
I'm sorry, did you say me, Dan?
Yes.
I am not. I'm sorry. No, I wonder if this is something we can get back to the committee on, or if this is within ECCC's mandate.
Et peut-être pour clarifier, si je peux me permettre, est-ce qu'on parle...
And perhaps to clarify, if I may, are you talking about carbon? The mechanism, the carbon adjustment mechanism, like what was adopted by the European Parliament, with tariffs, rates based by country, in fact. Okay, I understand what you're referring to now. That's more of an issue that falls under Environment Canada. It's primarily their mandate. Well, then I'll make a note. We're talking about tariffs and whatnot, but, well, I would be more than happy to come back with an answer on that. Well, thank you. Thank you for the information. How much time do I have left? Well, in 20 seconds, then I won't ask any further questions.
Mr. Massey for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you. With regards to our exports and imports with clean tech, Asia and Europe are just in two big categories. Is there any dominant country that we're dealing with regards to Asia and Europe? We just have basically, from our notes, them as large blocks, which is pretty significant. Just wondering where there might be a significant connection.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. So if I understand the question is if we have dealings which are a bit more specific than just looking at large blocks such as Asia and Europe, and my response to this in terms of the level of collaboration we have on a variety of fronts, nothing in particular, but absolutely we have treaties in many cases, science, tech, and innovation treaties with a lot of these countries within Asia, as well as within Europe, and by which we look at really specific collaboration in various areas, which include energy and clean tech and other areas.
Right, but for the Asia, for example, does that what's China as that portion of that? Do we have any idea? Do we have a couple of dominant nations? Is what I'm looking for. Sorry, thanks.
Yeah. I can answer that if you'd like. So China is actually at 2.8% of our total exports, whereas Japan is the next. I guess you would consider was India at 1.4 and Japan at 1.2. Okay. That's the percentages of our 2019 exports.
Okay, so China would be the larger but the smaller portions compared to the United States and everywhere else.
Yeah, much different scale.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Martel for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank the witnesses for being with us today. So I'll start off with a series of questions. First of all, we know that there is an increased demand for electricity as part of our strategies, but at the same time, we're looking at developing export markets. So the question that I have is this. Can Quebec and Canada meet that increasing demand for electricity?
Merci pour.
Well, thank you for the question, Madam Chair. That is a very good question. At present, with the energy crisis, we're looking at availability of electricity and oil, and that's something that needs to be looked at in greater detail. There is some leeway in some areas, others not, because of supply from the United States, because of a number of factors. Thank you. Now, if I talk about natural gas, liquid natural gas, processed using hydroelectricity, do you consider that to be part of the energy transition?
Merci pour la question.
Again, thank you for the question. There are no sources that are excluded at this point. So there is a great deal of focus on hydroelectricity, on using it as a source for the transition, like other sources as well. All of these sources will be considered at this point. Question, well, how can we develop them more? How can we export them? If you could be brief, please, in your answer. Answer, well, we're investing in the industries, in the energy. We're involved with the different types of technology, with the various government strategies to facilitate partnership and to research, to facilitate international cooperation as well. So we've got different strategies in different areas for hydrogen, as you mentioned. And that's how we plan to support these sectors. Well, thank you, Danielle. I work with the small and medium-sized businesses in my riding, and many of them are, in fact, developing green technology. So I'd like to know if there's any financial assistance that's available for them. Often I get asked about that. Well, we have the hub that we mentioned, the Clean Growth Hub, and we help to people to navigate the federal system of funding and services, and that's where they should turn to get the information they need. It includes 17 departments and agencies that support energy. So that is really the gateway for that type of information. Well, thank you, Danielle. My colleague has a question. Could I share my time with my colleague? Yes.
Very much, and I'll be quick. You've talked about green energy and the fact that you don't know where nuclear lies. So how can you explain how nuclear energy was excluded from the green bond framework by this government? So if it was excluded from that framework, obviously this government isn't thinking that nuclear energy is green. Can you add to those comments, please?
Amanda?
So by the silence, I'd say that it's concerning.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was my double mute again. I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. I was just going to say that the Department of Finance is obviously ultimately responsible for the green bond framework, so I would defer to them on.
I understand that. So are you saying the Department of Finance didn't ask the Natural Resource Department at all what should be in and what should be out of the green bond framework?
NRCan contributed, obviously, to that framework as a number of departments, but we did not make the final decisions with respect to that framework.
So is NRCan's recommendation to have nuclear in the green bond framework?
No, that is not what I said, sir. I said that the Department of Finance is best placed to answer the question with respect to the green bond framework.
We have a minute or two left. If you have a very hot and fire question you want to get out there.
Thank you very much, and thanks very much to the witnesses. Just a quick question about the Trade Commissioner Service, because I understand that we've got, in terms of sort of promoting clean tech, and it's definitely a focus for the government, and the minister held a global clean tech advisory group meeting back in March of last year. But we know also that among the trade commissioner services, we've got 4 clean tech trade commissioners that are based in different parts around the planet. Can you tell us about how that sort of function is operating, and also what you would foresee in terms of sort of what we need to do in terms of enhancing the trade commissioner service to better promote clean tech?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question. I don't want to expend too much on the Trade Commission Service. It is clearly with my global affairs colleagues, but I do want to say that we have been working extensively with the Trade Commissioner Services, in part by making sure that the relationship is strengthened between the TCS and NRCan in the various fields where we think there's opportunities for growth, or where we want to help some of our industries export their technologies and their expertise. So there are strong linkages between the two. They're also part of the Clean Growth Hub that I mentioned before. They're a member of the Clean Growth Hub that, again, is comprised of 17 department and agencies. So this is how, from the NRCan perspective, we really work with TCS in terms of beefing up their expertise and leveraging their capacity to really best support industry entering these markets.
We ran out of time. Thank you very much to the witnesses. We appreciated you taking your time and sharing your expertise with us this afternoon. We will now go in camera. So thank you to the witnesses. You can leave now.
Thank you.